สนับสนุนโดยพลังของทุกคนร่วมก่อเกิดเป็น AIA เราคือพลังสร้างอนาคตเมื่อทุกรายละเอียดสร้างมาเพื่อการตอบสนอง Chevrolet Cruise Engineer to Respond ใหม่ Isuzu D-Max Super Titanium น้ำดื่มสะอาดน้ำดื่มตราสิงห์ติดกล้องฟูจิโกะวันนี้ลุ้นไปเกาหลีฟรีกับแพนเค้ก
Professor Amartya Sen, you met the Thai Prime Minister yesterday. What did you tell him?
Oh, I was talking with him. I've known him for a long time, so I was trying to find out what his thinking are on different issues, from problems in Thailand to as well as problems of the world, of which there are many.
He was your student before.
Well, no, I couldn't say, well, I would be proud to claim him as a student. He came to some of my lectures, but he was directly a student of a friend of mine.
I understand you criticized him, especially his Burma policy.
Well, yes, I criticize every establishment government's Burma policy.
Yeah.
I don't get a chance to criticize the Chinese, so I don't do that. But if they wanted to listen to me, I will.
Yes.
But I did get a chance of criticizing my friend, very close friend, Prime Minister Manmohan Singh.
Oh, yes.
And I was actually giving a lecture in Delhi, which he was chairing. It wasn't on Burma, it was in education.
Right.
But at one stage I said that I ought to tell you, Manmohan, I don't agree with your policy. I don't know what your personal views are, but your government's policy I don't agree with. And I mentioned the same to
Kunapisit.
To Abhisit, yes. It says, I don't agree that there's nothing can be done in Burma. I think there's a kind of defeated psychology that's come in, thinking that things can't be changed in Burma. I mean, there are three different issues. Whether Burma can be changed, Myanmar is the hellhole version of old Burma.
Yeah.
And I have a lot of connection with Burma. I grew up as a child in Burma, in Mandalay. So I know the old, wonderful Burma. It's totally different now. So, but the three issues are: one, can the government be made to change, since they seem insanely dictatorial?
Yeah.
Secondly, there are particular interests involved. The Chinese have a lot of business connection. Thais have some business connection, but also have some political problem with groups, and Indians too.
Yeah.
And so they all have national interest, as it were. But the national interest at the cost of the Burmese people is not the right thing to do. That's my view. I say that in India, I say that in Thailand. If I had a chance, I would say that in China too.
Yes.
But I think the third issue is, what can we do about that? You see, the general sanction that we have, people say is not effective, and to some extent I agree, because it has to be much more targeted sanctions. You see, the garments, it hurts the Burmese people, but it doesn't really do the regime much harm. But if you were to target, first of all, still countries sell armament to Burma. There should be total sanction prohibition on arms sale. There should be very strong restrictions on trade in gems and in petroleum and so on.
You're talking about specific items.
Items.
Not general economic sanctions.
Yeah, and exactly. Which are particularly of interest to the rulers.
Okay.
Then there is question of travel. Now, some of the Burmese leaders are sufficiently peculiar not to want to go anywhere.
Yes.
But there are a lot of other Myanmar leaders do want to travel for pleasure or for medical treatment and so on. So there has to be a strong sanction on travel abroad.
Even if they go for medical treatment?
Anything. Because that's the only way of dealing with it at the moment. And then you, case by case basis, you might say, okay, we make an exception. The point is that they're treating their country with a barbarity, murder, rape, displacement of minorities, pushing them around everywhere, and so that they end up sometime in Thailand, sometime in Bangladesh, sometimes in India. It's a dreadful situation. So
but they say they're having an election now, so...
Well, the election was via one, where 25% of the seats were reserved for the military, where no criticism of the government was allowed in electoral statement. You can't have an election if you can't criticize a policy.
Yeah.
Where many of the leaders of the opposition were in jail.
Yes. Yes.
The cost of entry were extremely high for people who want to set up themselves. Now, I think we have different problems. The Chinese are very entrenched.
Yes.
And indeed, without Chinese support, the Myanmar government wouldn't last any time at all.
Right.
After the Chinese come the Thais and the Indians, because they, earlier on...
Between the Indians and Thais, who is worse?
Well, I don't know that. That's a big, interesting comparison.
Well, you're involved in both countries.
I'm involved in both countries, and I'm critical in this respect. I'm a great admirer of Thailand.
Yes.
I feel always totally at home when I come here, but that doesn't prevent me from criticizing Thailand when I think its Burmese policy is wrong. And it doesn't. I feel a very proud Indian citizen. I'm only Indian citizen, not British, not American, nothing.
But India is supposed to be the biggest democracy in the world.
I know. Well, Thailand is a democracy too. No, I think there's no point in saying which one is more faulty.
Yes.
I think both Thailand and India are faulty, and I've said that now. I've said that my views on that to my friend, the Prime Minister here. I said that to my very old friend from my college days. Manmohan Singh and I were college together.
So what would you like Thailand and India to do now?
Well, what I'm saying, to be a party to wanting a UN inquiry, to be a party to doing these targeted sanctions against the military rulers, asking them to change. I mean, obviously it has made, Thai's government have made in the ASEAN meeting quite often strong statements.
Yes.
I don't fault Abhisit for not being sensitive to the issue. But there has to be more now. And I think the Europeans and the Americans, they're very high on rhetoric.
Yep.
But they haven't withdrawn out of oil trade, out of general business. They could stop the financial transaction. That's another thing. All the financial centers of the world are basically Western or the Chinese.
Yes.
And the Chinese is very specialized. That's not enough for Burma. If the Europeans and the Americans clamp down on financial transactions, the Myanmar government would be in extreme difficulty.
You think it will work?
Yeah. Oh, it will work if they're ready to do it. But you see what happened that the Americans, the British, the French, the Germans, they give lectures for Thailand and India for not doing the right thing, and the Chinese for not doing the right thing. But they don't do it either. This doesn't give justification for India, China, or Thailand to do what they're doing. But it does I think, is dual standard, that Europeans and Americans make big rhetoric, but don't do the very obvious things they can do.
Have you been in touch with Aung San Suu Kyi?
Well, only indirectly. It's not easy to be in touch.
But she seems to be more accommodating now with the generals. She says she's ready to talk.
No, well...
and even on the sanctions issue, she says she's going to reconsider.
She has always been willing to talk. That's not the problem.
Yep.
The problem is to talk about what. That's the issue.
Right.
And I think there's strong pressure, even from Thailand, because Thailand has a lot of development, money-making ideas. You see, everyone want to make money out of Burmese people. Thailand does, India does, China is making big money out of that. But someone has to speak for the Burmese people. And inside, obviously Aung San Suu Kyi is still the biggest voice. Those who say that she's elderly, etc., they're ridiculous. Nobody stands in the way that she does in Burma, in the minds of the Burmese people.
You think she still plays a very vital role?
She could be a very vital role, but she wants to change. But one of my 10 things you would see, if I send you, is also to give the Burmese military leaders a way out. I think to say there's something to learn from South Africa. Don't go for bloody revenge.
Yep.
If people are ready to say remorse, well, okay, you're forgiven.
Yep.
What we want to do is not to penalize anyone.
No.
You know. What we want to do is to change. And you have to give a way out, even for the military butchers. I think we need a global Burma policy. We need the many voices in order for that to work. That's the point of democracy. Obviously, within Burma, the main leader will remain Aung San Suu Kyi, there's no question. I think the Europeans and Americans who have the right rhetoric should get their policies much better in shape. The Indians and the Thais don't even have the right rhetoric. They should get both the rhetoric and the policies in shape. And the Chinese have to rethink.
India has done what it has done about Burma because India is afraid of the Chinese influence in Burma. Don't you agree?
That's true. That's part of the story, certainly. And certainly there's no question that the biggest player in Burma is China. No question.
So you cannot say...
I don't take, and therefore I do want the Chinese to re-examine the policy. Yes, of course I do.
But you cannot say India and Burma are without conflicts. They obviously are competing in a number of ways.
I don't think India and China are competing in Burma. I think they are, I wish that were the case, because that would at least make it a resolvable problem.
Yeah.
No, I think I'm afraid I'm being very mean.
Yeah.
I think the Chinese, the Indians, and the Thais are making a lot of money out of Burmese people.
They're all squeezing
And by
Burma.
keeping it under dictatorial hand. The suffering public are the Chinese.
Yeah.
The gainers are the Chinese businessmen, Thai businessmen, Indian businessmen. And then they also get a little help. The Thais get a little with the minority community in the border. Indians get a little help from the separatists on the northeast frontier. So these are all dominated by individual national concern. I don't blame any country for attaching importance to national concern.
Yep.
I think the time has come for the world to do something together about Burma. And even though the Chinese businessmen, Indian businessmen, Japanese, and the Thai businessmen are making a lot of money out of Burma, to remember that that is at the cost of the interest of the Burmese people who are kept in a state of unbelievable tyranny.
Yeah. So we need you.
That has to change.
We need you, Amartya Sen, to keep agitating the world.
Okay.